The Marx Memorial Library was founded in 1933, and this building became its headquarters. 1933 was the 50th anniversary of the death of Karl Marx, who lived in this city, in London, for the longest period of his life, from 1849 from 1849 until 1883. It was here in this city that he produced his most respected and his richest work. And the discussion that took place in 1933, on the 50th anniversary of his death, was how that work could be remembered and celebrated in the life of London. And of course it was the same year that in Germany the Nazis came to power, and of course the spectacle of Marx's books being burnt in Humboldt University in Berlin haunted socialists all over the world. And so the decision was made in London to found a library to protect and propagate the ideas of scientific socialism, the ideas of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and the building has served as our home for the last 85 years. We've seen a marked growth in the numbers of people who want to come and use the library. We have applications from school students who want to find out about who Karl Marx was, what his role was in this city, and they want to get in touch with people who can tell them about the ideas of Marxism. So I've got an example here of some of the work that our volunteers do. This is a picture of Eleanor Marx, the daughter of Karl Marx, and she worked in this building. She worked here as part of the Social Democratic Federation, which was the first Marxist party in Britain. We've got a copy here of a poster which was produced in 1890. It was a poster advertising a meeting to commemorate the 19th anniversary of the Commune of Paris in 1871. And you can see the speakers at this public meeting included Eleanor Marx Aveling, the daughter of Karl Marx. So she's an important part of the history of the building and of the memory and the history that we are celebrating here. So when we talk about the Marx Memorial Library, we're not only talking about Karl Marx, we're also talking about his daughter, who was an important socialist and an important trade union organiser. She helped to organise the first gas workers' union in the 19th century in London. So we're just about to go into our reading room, where most of our researchers and students are working. Hi, how are you? Nice to see you. So this morning we've just got one of our volunteers is here doing some work, but when we have researchers looking at some of the historic newspapers and archives, they generally work in this room. What's immediately striking about it is this rather sort of unusual historic mural which was painted when the library was opened in 1934. And it illustrates some of the people connected with the library. So you can see at the right-hand corner there's Lenin, and behind him with the red beard, the English socialist William Morris. And on the left you can see Karl Marx with Engels behind him, and the utopian socialist Robert Owen to their left with a red flag. And the artist has created this picture which he's entitled "The Worker of the Future, Overthrowing the Chaos of Capitalism," and it kind of speaks for itself. So, in 1896, Lenin and Krupskaya are arrested. They're sentenced to 3 years of internal exile in Siberia, and eventually Lenin is released in 1901 and goes to Germany, where he stays for about 6 months. Krupskaya joins him, and then they came to London. So they arrived in London in April 1902, and at the time when they came here, this building was the centre for the Social Democratic Federation, which was the first Marxist party in Britain. And the editor of the newspaper of the Marxist party offered this office to Lenin in order to organise the Iskra group, which was the group of Russian Social Democrats, comrades, who were trying to reorganise a newspaper and a party, which is here. So this is an original page of the newspaper Iskra, the Spark, which would have been printed in this building on the 20th Century Press. Of course, the English printers didn't speak Russian. They couldn't read the Russian Cyrillic letters, so they had to bring in Russian printers who composited the pages and printed the newspaper. It was smuggled from this building into the docks of London, into the port of London, and then taken into the Russian Empire through a variety of secret routes, because of course it was an illegal publication, and anyone found with a copy of Iskra would be arrested and imprisoned. So the ideas which gave birth to the first socialist state, the USSR, were inculcated in this room. The people who used this room 115 years ago were the people who gave birth to the modern idea of socialism in its modern form, both in China and in many other countries around the world. So we welcome visitors from China, we welcome visitors from all over the world who want to come and sit where Lenin sat and to understand where he worked and enjoy the history of this building. This overcoat is actually an overcoat that belonged to Georgy Dimitrov, the secretary of the Comintern, the International of Communist Parties, in the 1930s. It's here partly because we like Dimitrov and his contribution to socialist theory, but also because it reminds us of the spirit of solidarity and humanity, because the reason Dimitrov's coat is in London is because the British communist leader Harry Pollitt went to a meeting in Moscow in the 1930s and forgot to take his coat with him. And when he landed in Moscow, it was extremely cold. So Dimitrov gave him his coat and he brought it back. So for us, it's just a small reminder of the connection between the British communists and Dimitrov. One of the areas that we're currently working on is a collection of political posters from all over the world. I mean, these here are French. Well, they're printed in this country, but they're obviously posters for the French to be distributed in France when it was occupied by the Nazis. So these are posters which say the munition workers of our allies have a response to Hitler. From the factories of Britain. So it's these are wartime posters which were disseminated in France under the German occupation between 1940 and 1944 in order to support the French resistance to fascism. In our poster collection, we have about 2,500 political posters from all over the world. A large collection of Soviet posters from the former Soviet Union, but also from Yugoslavia, from France, from Italy, from this country, from a number of Asian and African countries as well. And we're in the process of digitizing this collection to make it available online for students to study and even for people to buy where they wish to. We're also in a room which contains a large number of early first edition books of the British radical movement. So amongst the books here we hold, for example, handwritten maps drawn by British radicals in the 200 years ago, showing the positions of British army regiments in parts of Britain at the time when the working class movement was preparing for a revolution. So they needed to draw maps to understand where the army regiments were being stationed. So some of the original works that we have here are not available anywhere else in the world, not even in the British Library, and they give a really unique insight into the politics of the British working class movement 200 years ago, right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We're very interested in teaching workers who come to classes here about the ways in which the British trade union and working class movement has changed over time. In its origins, at the end of the 18th century, the beginning of the 19th century, it was motivated by a number of overtly revolutionary individuals and leaders. By the middle of the 19th century, with the growth of British imperialism, the British working class movement had become much more conservative, much more dedicated to upholding the system of imperialism. And it was only at the end of the 19th century, with the development of mass trade unions, amongst which were started by people including Karl Marx, it was only at this period, at the end of the late 19th century, that we saw the development again of revolutionary ideas amongst the working class and their popularisation. So that's the tradition which we stand in and where we're trying to make workers today aware of. Part of doing that is allowing people to look at some of these very rare works. So in these old buildings, you would find that the ground floor, which is actually where we're now standing, was originally for storing goods, because the area was built on a floodplain, so they never lived on the ground floor. Today this is our basement, and it's a properly watertight and it's kept under climatic controlled conditions. But what we have down here is our main collection of newspaper archives, magazines and periodicals from Marxist writings all over the world. We have a complete collection of the Daily Worker newspaper, which is nowadays called the Morning Star. So this is the newspaper of the British Communist Party, and that has been published since 1930 as a daily newspaper. It's still published today. It was published this morning. And we have their complete archive collection here, which is something that people often come in to research.